Hi everyone, it's your very favorite history teacher. Let me see your transcript. And I just want to give a short history lesson about protests from the civil rights movement to the Black Lives Matter movement. Civil rights movement in the 1950s was rooted in basically trying to overturn Plessy versus Ferguson. African Americans are starting that they are equal citizens to other people. Much of the Jim Crow South treated us like second-class citizens, especially after World War II, where many brave black men and women fought for their country. They protested, they sat in, they did pray-ins, they integrated lunch counters, integrated schools. But even today, we still continue, as we see in the Black Lives Matter movement, that we're still fighting for equal rights. Like I said, they marched. They had signs in the civil rights movement. They marched on Washington. They marched from Selma to Montgomery. And here we are marching in our own cities. Houston, Ferguson, Baton Rouge, Minneapolis, Los Angeles, New York, wanting to end the police brutality on our black bodies. Right now, we're trying to fight COVID and the spread of that in our own communities, but we're still fighting police brutality. A few weeks ago, we had to see finally the murderers of Ahmaud Arbery to be turned over to the police. Then we had the senseless murder of Breonna Taylor, a woman who was working on the front lines, I believe as a nurse during this COVID crisis. Our predecessors, our ancestors, previous generations, they also had signs and protests and marches against police brutality. And still, 50, 60 years later, we're still doing the same thing. Back then, they had the early stages of TV and news shows. Now we have social media and our own cell phones aiding us. We need to learn from history. Look at the things that were successful so we can repeat those things now. But I want you to understand the Civil Rights Movement and the Black Lives Matter movement are almost one and the same. What happened back then happens now. Police is still being used by saying, oh, we're just here to maintain law and order, but actually a lot of times they make the situation worse. They're out in riot gear with clubs, with tear gas. Back then it was tear gas. They still use tear gas, but now also pepper spray. The right to protest is rooted in the First Amendment. Freedom of speech, right to protest, right to peacefully assemble. But they're finding out ways to arrest us if we're blocking the intersection, if we're blocking parts of the sidewalk. To those warriors on the front line, we salute you, we support you, we understand. Minneapolis, we understand. George Floyd should never have been killed, just like Eric Garner in New York. Black people, please stay safe out there, whether it's COVID or it's racism. Black people, all we want, America, all we want is to be free as the rest of you. There'll be no need to protest, or in some cases what the conservatives will say, oh, you're rioting. It's still a form of civil disobedience, whether or not it's civil unrest. Minneapolis has had 3 different deaths due to police violence in the last several years. So guess what? I understand. The same thing with the Detroit riots in the 60s, the Los Angeles Zoo Suit riots in the 40s. History repeats itself. But will we actually learn from it this time?